Hi everyone, it's Julia again, and this is the last of the short videos in which I will be talking about guidance from the Office for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Education. In this short video, I'm going to be discussing the more recent guidance that has been provided. First, I'd like to talk briefly about the 1991 Office for Civil Rights Memorandum related to special education. This memorandum was important because in this document they explicitly discussed that you cannot identify students as having a disability if what they are really measuring is a lack of proficiency in English. And that has been a challenging issue for us for the history of special education. How can you really tell what is a language difficulty that stems from not yet having learned English versus a difficulty that stems from an underlying disability? That is a very complex and difficult thing to do. And in a later video, I will talk about some assessment best practices that will help untangle some of this confusion. Even so, it's important to remember that we can never be certain that we have clearly determined what is a result of a disability and what is the result of a student who is still in the process of developing English. Another important aspect of the 1991 Office for Civil Rights Memorandum was the issue of compliance reviews. And what I especially like about this is the third point. But first, I'm going to just highlight the first, which speaks to the prior quote, so that it's important when there is a review for compliance with these guidelines that they are looking to see whether students who are placed in special education actually belong there. The second thing that they're looking at is whether the school district is indeed addressing students' English as a second language development needs. So are they addressing whether or not students can speak English with some sort of systematic program? The third one that is so interesting for me is that they really are looking to make sure that there are not policies that prohibit students from receiving both English learner services and special education services. In my experience as a faculty member and working with many teachers in the schools, there has been in some places the perception, if not outright policies, of quote unquote no double dipping. That's in direct counter to federal guidelines. In fact, if a student does have a disability and they are an English learner, they should be receiving both sets of services. And neither service has an advantage over the other. There is no greater weight given to special education services, for example, than to receiving English learner services. So you cannot have a school system that refuses to provide both sets of services to English learners with disabilities who require both. Then what was also very helpful was the 2015 guidance. Very well organized, 4 pages with nice bullets. So kudos to that. Many of my students have really appreciated reading that document, find it well organized. Every single bullet point on there is really important. But a couple things that I'd like to highlight are that, as I've said, both special education and English learner services, sometimes called alternative language services, ALS, are both federal entitlements, meaning students are entitled to receive these services. They highlight, as is in many documents, that special education assessments must be in an appropriate language for the student. That is a continuing issue for the field, as there are very few assessments, even for Spanish, which is the most common language other than English, spoken by students in our U.S. public school systems. However, it's not okay to just say, oh, well, whoops, we can't do it. We as a field have known for many, many years, decades, that this is an issue. And so I think it's incumbent on us to determine this instead of saying, whoopsie daisy, we don't have it. Another thing is that, as we've discussed from some legislation, is that participants who are involved in developing students' individualized educational programs, that they must be familiar with students' language needs, not just disability. And that usually means that you have somebody who is an ESL specialist or a bilingual educator participating in the IEP. That's very important and really needs to happen. Finally, students may not recommend that students opt their children out of receiving alternative language services like ESL. If parents want to do that, that's fine, but schools cannot make that recommendation. It is not for us to tell parents what they need to do and to encourage families to opt out. There are many other things included in that document, and I encourage you to read it.